Emily always enjoyed hitting the road, especially when driving through the captivating desert landscapes of Nevada. The sun bathed the surroundings in a mesmerizing golden hue, while a refreshing breeze blew through the open window. She was eagerly anticipating this trip, as it had been a while since she last saw her college friends. Her boyfriend, Jim, drove in silence, lost in his own thoughts and almost meditative behind the wheel. Initially, he wasn't too keen on the idea of this trip. Traveling nearly 1,000 miles across 2 states to visit Emily's friends seemed like a lot to him. He couldn't help but wonder if Emily would be as willing to embark on such a journey if it were to see his own friends. The thought lingered in his mind. Meanwhile, Claire, Emily's friend, peacefully dozed off in the back seat. Having attended the same school, she was the only one in the car who seemed content with the ride. Jim found Claire to be a bit eccentric and peculiar, so her presence irritated him more than it pleased him. However, Emily had insisted, almost with an ultimatum, that Claire join them. Jim resisted at first, but Emily made the argument that Claire would contribute towards the cost of gasoline, which managed to convince the thrifty Jim to agree. After driving for about 6 hours, nightfall was approaching, and they had planned to spend the night at a motel along the way. Unfortunately, they found themselves in an area devoid of any accommodations, and there was no internet reception to search for alternatives. So they continued driving, hoping to stumble upon the first available motel. Most of the journey was spent in silence, with the radio playing softly in the background, while each occupant was engrossed in their own thoughts. Jim pondered how much longer it would take to reach a motel, trying to estimate their typical progress and mentally measuring the distance they had covered thus far. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting its final rays, the sky transformed into a stunning display of orange and purple hues. The sunset was a picturesque sight, captivating their attention and momentarily causing Jim to forget his frustrations and negative thoughts. However, the fuel gauge brought him back to reality. The needle was edging perilously close to empty, with the warning light already flashing red. He inwardly cursed himself for not carrying a spare can of gasoline in the trunk, as he had not anticipated such a lengthy journey. They continued driving for another 15 minutes until the fuel gauge finally plummeted to 0, intensifying Jim's concern that they might end up stranded in the middle of nowhere. The lack of any signs of civilization was far from reassuring. They needed to take action. A few more minutes passed, and then Jim spotted a gas station sign by the roadside. It was peculiar that the sign directed them to a road branching off from the main highway. Nevertheless, with no other options in sight, Jim made the decision to follow the sign's direction. The surroundings plunged into darkness as they cautiously proceeded, trying to conserve every drop of gasoline by refraining from excessive acceleration. The idea of pushing the car to the gas station was far from appealing. Just as Jim was grappling with the situation, Claire woke up and bombarded him with questions about their whereabouts and what on earth they were doing. This only served to further agitate Jim. Thankfully, the sight of illuminated gas station lights appeared around the corner. It was an incredibly old gas station, seemingly lifted straight out of a movie set. Its appearance suggested it had been standing for at least 4 decades. They gazed at it with a mixture of curiosity and intrigue. Surprisingly, it appeared well maintained, with the lights on, and even offering attractively affordable gasoline prices. They pulled into the gas station to take a break. The girls went inside to grab some water and snacks for the journey, while Jim tried to figure out the old-fashioned pump system. It resembled a vintage jukebox and was starting to frustrate him. But he managed to overcome his annoyance and successfully inserted the nozzle into the car. Jim thought it would be a good idea to buy an energy drink. He realized that the girls probably hadn't thought about it, and they still had a significant amount of driving ahead. He walked towards the entrance, noticing an oddly serene atmosphere around him. The absence of external sounds and the muffled quality of his footsteps caught his attention, but he brushed it off as exhaustion taking its toll. Inside the gas station, the girls were browsing the shelves. While Jim headed to the soda refrigerator, he grabbed an energy drink and glanced around the empty store. There was no one else present, not even a cashier. Jim was struck by the unusually clean and well-organized condition of the place. It was surprising to see such cleanliness in such a remote gas station. After gathering their items, they approached the cash register. No one was there, but there was a bell on the counter. They rang it and waited, assuming that the attendant might be napping. Jim could empathize, as he himself would have been sleepy working in such a secluded area. However, no one appeared, so they rang the bell again. Finally, the backroom doors squeaked open, and the attendant emerged to the cash register. He was a thin, middle-aged man wearing jeans and a dark hoodie. He didn't offer a greeting, but simply stood behind the register, observing the group with an unwelcoming gaze. Jim felt uneasy under his gaze. Emily politely greeted the attendant and placed their items on the counter. The attendant remained silent, mechanically scanning the purchases. Jim mentioned needing a full tank of gas and pointed towards their car through the window, since he couldn't recall the pump number. To his surprise, the attendant silently entered the gasoline amount into the receipt without even glancing back at the car. It was as if he knew exactly which pump they were using. When the total appeared on the cash register screen, Claire extended the money towards the attendant. However, in an instant, Claire let out a horrified cry and recoiled. Both Jim and Claire were baffled by what had just occurred. The attendant stood motionless, while Claire breathed heavily, wide-eyed with terror, fixated on him. Without a moment's hesitation, Claire bolted out of the store. The situation felt surreal. Emily followed her friend outside to find out what had transpired. Jim turned to the attendant, seeking an explanation. But the attendant simply shrugged his shoulders. Jim knew Claire had her peculiarities, so he sighed, counted the money, and placed it on the counter. He bid the attendant farewell and exited the store. The girls were already back in the car. As Jim listened to the sound of the gas tank filling, a sense of tranquility washed over him. He stood silently, gazing at the gas station. There was definitely something peculiar about it. It was devoid of dust and sand, an unusual sight in the middle of Nevada. It was as if someone had cleaned it meticulously just before their arrival. The oddity continued beyond the store, manifesting itself on the streets. Jim climbed into his car, and they resumed their journey. He decided to break the silence and asked Emily about what had happened. Emily assured him that Claire had simply been oversensitive due to waking up abruptly, and there was no cause for concern. Jim knew it would be futile to argue, as Emily would always support her friend's perspective. After approximately 10 minutes on the road, a motel sign came into view. Jim felt relieved and began envisioning himself enjoying a cold beer on the motel's terrace. His thoughts were abruptly interrupted by Claire. It was very cold, Claire stated. Her words sounded somewhat strange, leaving Jim unsure of how to respond. He found her high-pitched scream over the man's cold hands to be rather exaggerated. Glancing at Emily for support, Jim noticed she intentionally avoided eye contact. Realizing he simply wanted to reach the motel and conclude the day, he chose not to engage further. The motel was conveniently located by the roadside, promising a swift respite. At the motel, it was business as usual. A drowsy receptionist, rooms that lacked cleanliness, and the lingering scent of dust. However, exhaustion had taken its toll, rendering these factors inconsequential. They obtained a room, and the girls promptly occupied the bathroom. Jim sighed once more, grabbed a beer from the refrigerator, and stepped outside. A man sat at a nearby table, leisurely smoking and sipping his own beer. Seems like we're all in the same boat, Jim contemplated. He opened his beer and savored a few sips, finding solace in the experience. The tension within him seemed to dissipate with each passing moment. Searching for a lighter to accompany his cigarettes, Jim grew dismayed when he couldn't locate one. He mentally cursed his luck and reluctantly approached the man, seeking a light. Socializing was the last thing he desired, but his craving for a smoke overpowered his reluctance. A casual conversation ensued, basic introductions, origins, destinations, and the like. Jim recounted their recent misadventures, and all went well until the topic of the gas station arose. When Jim mentioned their lucky encounter with the station, the man's brows furrowed in confusion. "What gas station?" the man inquired, staring at Jim as if he had spoken gibberish. "Well, it's about 10 minutes away. There's an exit to the right off the main road. It's an old place, but it appeared to be well maintained. That's where we refueled," Jim explained. "Young man, you need to quit smoking or whatever it is the young folks do these days," the man replied. "What do you mean?" Jim felt a twinge of annoyance toward the man's behavior, and regretted striking up the conversation. "That gas station you're talking about, it shut down a good 10 years ago. I knew the owner, Robert. It had been there for quite some time, and they cleared out everything a week after it closed." Jim felt a slight jolt of surprise at the man's words. It seemed like the man should be cutting back on his own smoking, not Jim. The gas in the tank and the money spent were certainly not figments of his imagination. He finished his cigarette in silence, bid the man farewell, and returned to his room. Sleep eluded him as thoughts of the gas station persisted. Claire's words also echoed in his mind. After tossing and turning for around 20 minutes, he resolved that he would go mad if he didn't investigate further. Quietly slipping out of the room, he entered his car and swiftly drove towards the sign. The sign appeared unchanged. He turned onto the road leading to the gas station. He drove while continuously expecting to see the lights of the gas station. However, there were none, and he tried to recall how long they had been driving before encountering the bend. What he witnessed next left him questioning everything he knew and saw. He abruptly slammed on the brakes. In the headlights, there stood a gas station, the very same one. Yet it matched the description of the abandoned station provided by the man at the motel. It was old and dilapidated, with shattered windows and sand covering every surface. Not a trace of life could be found. A shiver ran down Jim's spine as he was overcome with horror. He quickly reversed his car, his heart pounding in his chest. In the glare of the headlights, he caught sight of a figure standing at the entrance of the gas station. Letting out a scream, he pressed harder on the accelerator. He couldn't even remember how he managed to return to the motel. He leaped out of the car, determined to find the man and share everything he had experienced. However, as he stood in the motel courtyard, he realized there were no other vehicles parked besides their own. Panic engulfed Jim even further. Perhaps the man wasn't real either. Frantically, he rushed to the receptionist and demanded to be checked out immediately. Emily and Claire were taken aback by Jim's sudden insistence on leaving. They began to argue, but Jim, raising his voice and forcefully pushing them, insisted they depart. As they drove away, Emily grew indignant and demanded an explanation for his behavior. Jim made an effort to calmly explain what he had encountered. However, Emily regarded him as if he had lost his mind. Deciding she had had enough for the day, she reclined her seat, placed her blouse under her head, and turned towards the window, intending to take a nap. Claire remained silent, staring at her hand, her fingers feeling a lingering chill. Jim didn't ease up on the accelerator until dawn broke. There should have been enough gas to last them until the end of their journey.